When the Spanish expeditionary force, led by Hernán Cortés, first crested the mountain pass above the Valley of Mexico, 1519, they were confronted with a vision that challenged their understanding of the world. A city larger than any in Europe, built in the middle of a lake, gleaming of white limestone. This was just what Hernán was looking for. After hearing rumors of glorious cities and piles of gold, he set off with 500 men against orders from his government. Knowing he would certainly face prison if returned empty-handed, he knew the absolute necessity of his mission's success. And here it was, Tenochtitlan. Using advanced AI techniques, we've transformed centuries-old engravings and scriptures into accurate 3D scenes to show you how this impossible city functioned and how it was eventually captured with unconventional strategies and ancient biological warfare that led the outnumbered Spaniards to conquer one of ancient time's most advanced cities. But to understand why Tenochtitlan fell, we first have to understand how it functioned. In 1325, the Aztecs settled on a small, swampy island in the shallow waters of Lake Texcoco. A peculiar place to build a city, but was justified by one great idea, using a special technique that took advantage of the shallow lake. To begin, they placed wooden logs beside each other to form rectangular plots, pounded them down into the lake bed, and lashed them together with reeds. This made a solid frame that the Aztecs would then pour in mud and rocks to essentially create more land. These so-called chinampas were very beneficial for two reasons. Firstly, it made everything incredibly accessible, as canoes could easily travel throughout the city with goods. But the layout of the chinampas were also very well suited for agriculture, as it provided a constant, steady supply of water that allowed plants to soak up just the right amount all the time, enabling these floating gardens of producing up to 7 harvests a year if it wasn't for one big problem. You see, Lake Texcoco was a closed basin with no outlet, meaning water flowed in from the surrounding mountains but had no natural outlet. During the rainy season, the lake levels would rise, threatening to submerge the low-lying city. But even worse, the closed basin held 5 different lakes. The southern lakes had pristine fresh water, but to the north were 2 lakes with salty and brackish water. These all mixed in Lake Texcoco, creating a big problem for the Aztecs, as the water was often too salty to drink and unfit for agricultural use. But they had a genius idea, which is now renowned as one of ancient time's craziest engineering marvels. The dike of Netzahualcoyotl. Stretching 17 kilometers, it worked very specifically to do 2 things. First was regulating the water level. You see, its huge and structurally solid design consisted of logs hammered down into the lake bed, where afterwards a foundation of sand and limestone were placed on top to hold 9 horizontal logs that acted as a wall to keep in mud and stones that then became an impenetrable wall to keep out water. But only keeping water out was not sustainable, as this would cut off a major supply of water, and the city would be at risk of drought. So by using sluice gates in the dike, the Aztecs could control the water level, keeping it the same throughout the dry and rain seasons. But most importantly, it kept out the brackish water from the northern lakes. This new supply of pristine fresh water was perfect for agriculture, and with the new security of flood protection, the city grew rapidly. But with this, a new problem arrived. The local springs and new water became insufficient for the growing population and potentially getting contaminated by urban waste. After years of being readily available, clean water suddenly became a scarce resource. All big water springs were located far away on the mainland and were very unpractical to get to for the low-lying city. But the Aztecs knew they had gravity on their side, as the water only needed to be transported down into the city and not away from it. With this in mind, they built a huge aqueduct that transported fresh drinking water directly into the city, where it fed into public fountains and reservoirs, and even straight into upper-class households. But recognizing that a single pipeline would eventually require maintenance, the engineers opted for a redundant system of 2 parallel pipes. This foresight ensured that if one required repairs, the water flow could be diverted through the other, preventing any disruption to the city's water supply. By the 1500s, Tenochtitlan was a teeming, sophisticated metropolis housing over 250,000 people. When the Spaniards first entered the city, they report being very surprised of how clean the city and Aztec population was. Many bathed up to twice a day, and urban waste was taken out of the city daily, a big contrast to Europe, where all of this was merely an afterthought. Moctezuma II, the then current emperor, had heard a lot about these Spaniards. You see, before arriving at Tenochtitlan, Cortés had already left a trail of slaughtered Aztec allies and forged alliances with their bitterest enemies. Hoping to avoid an all-out war, Moctezuma chose hospitality over hostility, welcoming the Spaniards into his palace. It was there that the Spaniards discovered a chamber overflowing with gold, the very prize Cortés needed to justify his mutiny against the Spanish crown. Eager to take over the city and finish what he started, Cortés demanded Christian symbols be placed alongside Aztec idols, leading to a violent clash that killed 7 Spaniards. In response, Cortés seized Moctezuma as a hostage to control the city, putting the whole temple under house arrest. Despite pressure from his leaders to fight back, Moctezuma maintained his peaceful stance, eventually allowing the Spaniards to build a Christian altar on the temple, a move that signaled his transition from a powerful ruler to a puppet of the Spaniards. The Aztecs were growing very impatient with their emperor, but even worse, Cortés received word that a Spanish fleet had arrived to arrest him for treason, forcing him to leave Tenochtitlan with his best men to deal with it. In the time Cortés was gone, an Aztec festival with human sacrifice was to take place. During this, the Spanish garrison left in Tenochtitlan slaughtered thousands of unarmed warriors and noblemen. They said only to stop human sacrifice, but survivors explain that, blinded by the jewelry worn by the attendees, the Spaniards grew wild with the lust for gold and began the slaughter simply to strip the dead of their riches. The Aztec people had had enough. They rose up in revolt, putting the Spaniards under siege in the temple. Arriving home to find this, after a victory, Cortés acted quickly, forcing Moctezuma to address the angry crowd and arrange a peaceful withdrawal. But he was rejected by his people, getting thrown darts and stones at him. The Spaniards knew they had to get out of there, so on a fateful night, they attempted to flee the city, carrying as much gold as they could. But they were discovered, and a storm of Aztecs quickly got out to fight, many getting into canoes to stop the Spaniards from fleeing through the causeways. This night would later be known as the Night of Sorrows, and the Spaniards and allies had taken a massive hit, with well over half of their men dead. But Cortés had something on his side that even he didn't know. Entering the city, one of his slaves carried smallpox, a deadly disease many Spaniards were now immune to. Because of his sick condition, the slave was left in Tenochtitlan, and the sickness would soon start a whole new war. While Cortés and his men regrouped and started to get ready to attack again with even more allies, the lethal smallpox swept through Tenochtitlan, wiping out almost half of the population. But this was just one of 3 puzzle pieces that led the Spaniards to take over Tenochtitlan. During their stay, the Spaniards had noticed how all of the clean water coming into the city came through the aqueduct. This made Tenochtitlan the perfect target for a siege. On return, almost a year later, Cortés broke the aqueduct, effectively cutting the water supply, officially starting the siege of Tenochtitlan. The already struggling city was now left without clean water. But even still, after almost 2 months of cutting off potable water, the Aztecs stood firm, holding their territory. Food was not a problem, and the water from the lake would do for now. So to deliver the final blow, the Spaniards needed one last thing. You see, to get into Tenochtitlan, you would have to use the causeways leading into the city. But there was a big problem with this. Attackers would be very vulnerable going up these, as the Aztecs could raise the causeway bridges and attack from the water using canoes, surrounding the Spaniards and leaving them no choice but to fall back. So Cortés tasked a shipbuilder with making 13 cannon-mounted brigantines designed for the shallow waters of Lake Texcoco. The brigantines could hold the canoes at bay and secure safe passage on the causeways, and they also functioned to carry supplies and soldiers into the city at a much larger rate. This worked as the last piece in the puzzle of conquering Tenochtitlan. And after 80 days of siege and fighting, the Spaniards had successfully conquered one of ancient times' most advanced cities. This is not necessarily a story of good and bad, as the bloodthirsty human sacrificing nature of the Aztecs meant they weren't exactly popular with their neighbors, which was why the Spaniards were able to ally themselves with many thousands of indigenous soldiers to begin with, being the biggest puzzle piece to victory. Today, in what is now called Mexico, the conquest is not seen as a defeat or victory, but rather the birth of a new people. Makes sense, given most of them are both descendants of the conqueror and the conquered.